What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. Marcia, Dawood of Mindshift Capital and chair of the board of the Angel Capital Association. Marcia, before we get started, I always like to mention other people that people should check out on the podcast, and so since this is in the spirit of top women leaders, and Andrea Houston, she's founder of, and she runs the Lead Like a Woman show. Actually, Marcia, you'd be an amazing guest on that. So, and she runs Artitudes Design. Dame Stephanie Shirley, incredible story, she wrote the book, Let It Go. She was a child refugee at age 5. Her parents sent her off because of the Holocaust, just to live with a random family that they did not know, just so to save her. She forged a path for not only women, but the whole computing industry. She ended up giving away more than 67 million pounds. She was from, the UK, to charity. She's still around and alive and kicking. Holly Lyman of Wild Tonic, one of my favorite kombucha brands, and many more. Check it out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We help you run your podcast. For me, Marcia, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way to do that over the past decade, to have the people and profile their company and their story on my podcast, so that everyone else can learn from them and hear about it as well. So if you've thought about a podcast, you should. And if you have questions, you go to rise25.com. Feel free to ask us anything. John and I have both been doing it for over a decade now, so happy to answer anything that you have. And Marcia has a podcast, which we'll talk about as well. And I am really excited to introduce Marcia. Dawood is an investor in over 200 early stage private companies. And in addition to her own investing, she's also a venture partner with Mindshift Capital. Mindshift Capital is a global women-run venture firm investing in amazing women-led companies solving big problems with sophisticated solutions. And she is part of the investment committee for the Next Wave Impact Fund. If she wasn't busy enough, she also serves as a board member and advisor to Zive, Misfits Bakehouse. CEO is an organization Marcia also actively supports, and she currently serves as the chair of the board of the Angel Capital Association. Marcia, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
And how'd you get into investing? And it started with your husband.
Right. Yes. It was one of those things that he came home one day and said, "Hey, I got invited to this angel investing meeting by this friend of mine at work." And I'm like, "What's angel investing?" And so we go to the meeting and I find out a little bit about it. And I was just fascinated. I was watching these entrepreneurs and I was like, wow, I had been in corporate America for, at that point, 12 years. And I ended up, staying for a couple more years even after that. And here I am watching these entrepreneurs talk about these amazing ideas that they were having. And I just thought, wow, I like this. I think I need to see more of this and get more involved.
When you were at University of Pittsburgh and you went on to get your MBA, what did you want to be when you grew up at that point?
I think when I was in college, I really wanted to be a retail buyer. And I did. I ended up working, and I lived in Pittsburgh. So there was 2 retailers there at the time. And I ended up working for the one and kind of moved my way up, started as an assistant buyer. My first job was as an assistant buyer in the China department. So I have so many dishes that I have been banned from buying any more dishes. Literally, I am not allowed in the dishes department of any store because I have so many dishes from being the assistant buyer there.
So from corporate America, what would you do after that? What was the next
So
step?
I actually worked as a buyer for about 5 years. And then I went on to Kaplan Education. And so there I was in sales and marketing for 10 years. I then went on to operations and was in operations for about 7 years. So I worked in compliance, career services, kind of everything. The last position I had, I reported directly to the COO of the company.
So the light bulb went on, when you were at that meeting and talking to your husband. So what was the first step into this world?
Yeah, so I just started going to the meetings. They were pretty convenient. They were in the evening. So I would go and get to hear all these different companies present. They were so extreme. Like there'd be one that was talking about some tech that you could, track your kids' sports statistics, or another one that was working on a medical device, and something else that was like a pharma drug. They were so different and solving so many big problems that really got me interested. But then I ended up moving a bunch of times, because with my husband's job, we ended up going to New York and Dallas and California and back to Charlotte. We could be here for hours talking just about that. But anyway, in the process, every time we moved, we'd usually, for over the last 8 years, we've been in places for roughly 2 years at a time. I would learn the ecosystem, and I learned a little bit about everything that was going on in New York City, things that were going on in Texas. And then, of course, I end up in Silicon Valley, which is kind of weird, because usually you hear a lot about this in Silicon Valley first, and then people come out to the other parts of the country. But yeah, really learned a lot, and started to learn very quickly, how little capital goes to women and people of color. And that, to me, was a very interesting statistic to learn. And I became a member of a group called Golden Seeds in New York back in 2014. And that's when I thought, this is where I need to be, and this is where I need to help.
Yeah. Marcia, women are really underrepresented. And what did you experience as a woman going through the process? You were going to the meetings, hearing the pitches, and in this world.
So I do remember, so the Angel Capital Association, which is the professional society of angel investors in the US, we have a summit every year. And in some of those early summits that I went to in the early 2012, 2013 timeframe, there was no line for the women's room. Okay, it was only lines for the men's room, which is very odd. So I could already tell that I was in an area where there were not a lot of women. But even in corporate America, there's a lot more men at the higher level jobs, and I experienced that also. So, I was realizing it, but also thinking, there's been so many amazing women ahead of me that have, been trailblazers. And I think in a lot of ways I was thinking, well, I just want to keep that going. I want to keep doing all that good work.
I want to talk and hear how you think about these companies when they're pitching angel investors. And I know people can check out your website. It's Marcia Dawood, which is, MarciaDawood.com. And then on your portfolio page, you show some of the companies. And one of them in particular is Cognition Therapeutics.
Right.
When they first came to you, we'll talk about that story.
Yeah. So this is a really, really interesting angel story, because they are one of the only companies that has raised so much money from angels that they were able to kind of jump right into getting a significant amount of grants. And then they ended up doing an IPO in 2021. So they raised well over, I think early on, they raised at least $30 million, and then they went on to raise even more millions from angels. But it was really one of those things that's very unusual to raise that much money from angels. Usually, once you get into the millions, you got to skip over to the VCs. And but the angels really took heart to this, mainly because the scientist who came up with the technology is female. She's amazing. And she put together a really, really interesting concept, an interesting company. And she's, been peer reviewed and gotten a lot of recognition. And, we're in very later stage clinical trials right now. So, fingers crossed that this could actually not just stop, but maybe even reverse some of the signs of Alzheimer's. And there are other inclinations also, like there could be help for Parkinson's and even ALS. And I personally have a connection to that, as my mom passed away from ALS in 2018. So I took a real significant look at this company, because I thought, wow, this is something that is making a big difference. This could be huge for all of the people that have suffered through all of these horrible diseases. And there's such a mystery. We don't really know how it happens, how people get it, how can you really prevent it? I mean, of course, we know there's things about food and water and, vitamins and things like that you can do, but if it's hereditary, not hereditary, what are these things? Believe me, we could have a long, long, long talk about that, because I've spent many hours researching and trying to figure out, like, how did my mom get ALS? How am I make sure I don't get ALS? Anyway, so back to Cognition, I just feel like they have a real strong foundation, a strong mission. And that's, I think, what attracted so many people. And they've just been, hitting the milestones and keeping it going. But I will tell you, a lot of these medical companies, whether it's a pharma drug or medical device, I mean, they take a lot of money and a lot of time. So it's not like you can say, hey, I'm going to invest in this. And like a year or two later, we're going to have a cure for cancer, Alzheimer's disease, whatever it is. It really does take a long time. I think Angel started investing in Cognition Therapeutics in 2010.
Over a decade later.
Mm-hmm. And we're not there yet. We're not the finish line. We're getting there, but we're not there.
Yeah. So Marcia, I want to hear what you look for, what you saw in Cognition Therapeutics, but what you look for in general when you're listening to someone pitch and ask for money, your hard-earned money. Before we do, just tell people a little bit about what does Cognition Therapeutics do?
So they are a pharma drug company. They're working on an actual drug that could help to prevent and, even possibly reverse Alzheimer's disease.
So what do you look for? What did you see I see, obviously you have a personal connection to that, but not all of the companies you invest in, you do have a personal, deep connection with. What do you look for?
I think probably the first thing is about the team. And so this is a good example. I invested in a company in 2021, actually Mindshift Capital did as well. And it was a female founder that I had met in 2015. So I knew her for 6 years. I followed her company. We were, kind of friendly. We would email every once in a while. She'd give me updates on what was happening with the company. It was a relationship. We built a relationship over time. And by the time she was at the point where she was really ready to take on some significant funding, there were a bunch of angels that she had been really, really good about communicating with and letting us know the milestones that she was hitting and how things were happening for the company. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the team. And I try to coach entrepreneurs to really start to build the relationships with potential investors or even potential acquirers, which sounds crazy. If you just have like a back of the napkin idea, why would you go talk to a potential acquirer already? It's too early, but it's never too early. It's never too early to start to build relationships with people and let them know what you're doing. Let them know what you're thinking about and how this could actually become a really significant business, because people will start to guide you along the way and that could save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache.
What did you see the difference from 2015? What were some of the milestones that you were looking for that as an investor, it becomes more and more interesting?
Okay. So the company's called Forte, and Lauren started the company thinking, well, she's really into fitness, lived in New York, very close to the Peloton studio. And she thought, well, wouldn't it be really cool if I could go and make a platform where I could have my strength training class, my yoga class, my Pilates class, and I could do them, whenever I wanted to. And I would just basically, she thought, well, I'll just go and I'll just pick one yoga studio, one Pilates studio, and that'll be it, and I'll have this like variety of stuff. And that was a cool concept. And it was starting to get some traction, but imagine what happened when 2020 hit, and there were a lot of companies that were like, whoa, here we want to people want to work out at home. They have to work out at home now. Like, wait, they can still come to the gym. No, can't come to the gym anymore. So what did people do? I mean, these were big companies, the YMCA, Orange Theory. I mean, all of these places were thinking to themselves, well, what are we going to do? And that's where Forte was able to say, wait a minute, I already built something. I can white label it and let whoever wants to use it. And that's when the story became way more interesting.
That's amazing. I've also heard you talk about, so you look at the team.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard you talk about the size of the market.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I I tell this to people a lot, like, don't have a solution in search of a problem. Like, it has to be something that is so sticky that you would just, it's such a pain to keep doing what you're doing that this solution is going to be like, yes, I need this. Like, I can't live without this. Right. Because otherwise, it's just like, well, it's just like, maybe, I guess I could still keep doing what I'm doing. It's not that bad. You don't want that kind of a reaction if you're trying to get people to change their behavior and actually use whatever it is that you're developing.
What were some of the companies that you listened to and you're like, what? Yes, you solve a huge pain point. Obviously, we talked about Cognition Therapeutics. I mean, if you have a loved one suffering with any of those things, it doesn't matter the amount of money it costs. Like, you will do whatever to keep them healthy with one of these things. What's another company or two that you immediately saw? Yeah, they're going after a huge pain point here.
Oh gosh, there's a bunch. I mean, there's anything. I'm not a scientist, but yet I have this like huge soft spot for anybody who's trying to solve some type of a medical problem, even if it's something that I don't have a connection to. So like there was a company that had a stent that could be put into somebody's heart. And it was the way that the CEO explained it. She just did such an amazing job of saying, look, I know you investors are not scientists. Some might be, but for the most part, not. And she was explaining like what happens in the operating room right now, and then what happens in the operating room once they start using her product. And I was just blown away at how still, even though technology has come so far and medicine has come so far, we're still using things in the hospitals that are really not great. And you're sitting there and you're feeling the frustration of the doctors and even of the people who have invented this new thing, whatever new thing is. And you're thinking, wow, why can't we get that in there? Because that just seems like such a no-brainer. But it isn't always that easy.
There's a lot of red tape.
A lot of red tape, and takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time.
Archaic practices and archaic industries. That makes sense. Another thing that you talk a lot about, Marcia, is the importance of asking customers. So I'd love for you to compare a company. I know you've dealt with a lot of companies that maybe they never really asked. They were just in their basement doing things, and then ones that actually got feedback.
Yes. Good point. So Zyve, which is the company where I sit on the board, they have a product called Kiwi for Gmail, and it's a way to take your Gmail and pull it off of the browser so that it's a standalone application, but on your desktop still. And I use this thing every day. If somebody tried to take it away from me, I'd be very sad. But what they did is they just made it, and they went out and started to give it to these like super users. And they were like, just try to break it, try to do whatever you can do to break it and tell us what's wrong. And then they just kept iterating so that it would get stronger and stronger and stronger, and they could do so much more with it. Then one of the very first companies that I invested in, which was a company doing statistics for kids in sports in like high school, they didn't really go out and ask that many people that many questions. And then the CEO he needed a new job. So he kind of took off. So that wasn't so great either. But so there's like a big difference. Like, I think people need to embrace what your customers are saying, because they are your customers. They just saying, well, I'm going to make this and it's going to be great because, that's what I think I would want to use. But the use cases are so incredibly different, especially when you're talking about an enterprise software or anything like that.
Marcia, where can people check out Zyve? What's the website?
They can just go to either Zyve.com or kiwiforgmail.com.
Kiwi for Gmail or Zyve, and that's Zive.com.
Mm-hmm.
What are other software and apps you can't live without? Because I have those too. You mentioned I would want to fly there if they shut my Zive down or something happened, and I would not be happy. What are some of the other software and tools you like to use?
Okay, so I have gotten interested, and I'm getting relatively dangerous at video editing, and audio editing, mainly for my podcast. And so I use this tool called Mavari. And I first got it because it was like a free trial or whatever. But now I've learned how to use it, and it was so intuitive and it was so easy that I actually was doing something the other day and I thought, well, it would be kind of fun if I could make my voice sound different. So I put all these filters on my voice, and then I was like, wow, this really does sound different. So that's like a more of a desktop app that I think is like really fun.
Any other productivity things with email or text or just communicating with team members that you like to use?
Well, I'm a huge Slack fan. I probably have like so many different people or different groups that I'm slacking with. And then sometimes I'll try to get people, like if we're trying to do a project or whatever, I'm like, well, let's set up a Slack, for ourselves and to use them. And then inevitably I can get like half or maybe 3/4 of the people to use it. And then the other people don't use it. And then you're just back to email. So sometimes I wish people would just, kind of gravitate over. I mean, there are so many things now that you can use. All kinds of different things. So it just kind of depends on what works out. But I think Slack is great because it just keeps all the conversations kind of separated, as opposed to email where you're kind of having to rely a little bit on your memory because you're going to have to search and find out, wait a minute, did I talk to that person? And what was that about again? And yeah.
We were talking before we hit record, some mistakes people make when reaching out to angel investors or investors.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the do not do?
Please do not send me a message on LinkedIn that says, I need $50,000. Because inevitably I'm not an ATM. Sometimes people think, oh, you're an investor, so you're going to be able to write me a check. That's what you do. Well, no, and it gets to a point too where all investors are like this. I don't care how much money you have or don't have. It all comes down to angel investing is a very risky asset class. So the collective they tell us that we should not have more than 5, maybe 10% of our net worth in this asset class. Now, I think I'm a little past that, but really we have to be careful to, and we also are looking for some returns to happen, and that takes time. So you've got two things kind of against you. But again, it goes back to, don't be thinking so much about money. It really has to do more with the relationship. And I feel like in so many cases, if people went out and just started asking for opinions or advice, they will get money, because if their idea is a good one, because what you're trying to do as an entrepreneur, you're trying to say, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Am I right? Like, do you think this is where it has some legs? Well, maybe there's somebody else that might know a little bit more about it. Because at the end of the day, angel investors have, a couple different expertise, but they're not an expert in everything. Like, I don't have a science background and I'm not really that great at, really advanced tech stuff or anything. So I would go and rely on, somebody who was, or somebody who knew a lot about a certain type of science. So, angels, we play together. We try to make sure that we really rely on each other. That's why you hear so much about angel groups. And angel groups will pool their expertise. They'll pool all of that great knowledge and be able to say, okay, now I can really evaluate a company because I know that this person knows about this. This person can look at the financials. This person can look at the tech. This person's going to be able to look at the team. And together, we can put together a pretty decent diligence memo to say that we've checked, all the boxes. You can always find reasons to not invest in a company. Always. I mean, they're early stage. There's tons of risk. You can always say, you know what? No, I don't like this, or I don't like that. And that might not even be the real reason why they didn't invest. But at some point, you've got to say yes if you really want to help support the entrepreneur.
Yeah. Like you were saying, there's so many more amazing intangibles there besides money. There's advice, right? And because you have a breadth of experience over many companies and many industries, and also connections and network, right? You could actually just shortcut someone's having an issue, an introduction that maybe the person would not even know to contact that person or company. And it really shortcuts a lot of energy, time, and money, I imagine too.
Yes.
A company out of Singapore.
Yes. Sheoak Meats. Really interesting company. They make cell-based meats, and they are revolutionizing the way that we eat meat. And I think, we've heard so much more in the last even 3 to 5 years, but even in the last 10 to 20 years about veganism, about the planet and how much water and land it takes in order to produce beef and chickens and a lot of our food supply. And, what if we switched to doing other things? We ate more of a plant-based meal. If we had things like Sheoak Meats who could make cell-based meats. So I just think it's fascinating to see the different things that are out on the market, and then, which kind of rise to the top, and how we can really make a better people, better planet, all those better things.
Where did they come to in their journey, and what did you see?
So they came relatively early, and Heather, my partner at Mindshift Capital, Heather Henyon, she lived in the Middle East for about almost 15 years. And so she kind of had this global view that I just found so fascinating. I love the fact that Mindshift can really span over such a huge geography of really the entire world, and be able to find some of these truly amazing companies that are working on things in parts of the world that maybe that wouldn't come to the US for a while, but yet we can kind of get that first glance in.
What's a lesson you learned from Heather?
Oh my gosh, so many things. She's like amazing. So she is a true trailblazer. She started the first women's angel group in Dubai called Women's Angel Investor Network, WANE. And she is unstoppable. There's nothing that she lets get in the way. And she's just helped so many entrepreneurs, and, helped with some companies at very early stages get over some really significant things. So, I mean, she's amazing.
On the health, right? We talked about the cell-based, plant-based meat, and also Cognition Therapeutics. I wanted to hear about what you found. I also geek out on health-related things, Marcia, and you've done a lot of research on, the ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. What have you found that you do to just help prevent, doing anything we can do in our control, some of these things as much as possible?
Well, I could probably sit here for like 3 hours and list them, but I would say number one on my list of priorities is water. And I have, for the last 20 years, lived in a place where the first call I make before the internet even getting turned on is to get a whole house water filtration system. And to me, that is super important because, yes, it does matter what kind of water we drink. And I could go on and on about that. But it really does matter because skin is our biggest organ. It really matters what we bathe in, how, really everything. And it was amazing. Even the house that I most recently moved into during COVID, I walked in the first day that we owned it, and I turned on the faucet, and I could even smell the difference in the water from what I was used to at my other house where I had a system. And that afternoon is when I had the plumber all ready to go with the new system. And it was an extreme difference. And I also learned over the years, moving around and having to do this in a couple different places, is that each region is different. So one system won't necessarily work in the same region as another. So But I think water is definitely a big one. I'm also a big fan, even though it looks like a lot of pills, I'm a big fan of supplements that are singular and not multi, because I think sometimes a multivitamin can actually give you too much of what you don't need. And I could go into all kinds of things, like there's a specific genetic variant that I have called MTHFR, which is something that means I can't process B vitamins the same way that other people do. So I have to take a specific type of B vitamin. But and it's pretty common. I mean, MTHFR.
Like methyl, is it like a methylcobalamin as opposed to cyanocobalamin?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
that's the better, I mean, even if you can process, it's probably better absorbed anyways in methylcobalamin form. Exactly. Not to get geeky on people, but like you could look at the back of the label and see, and I don't know if this is the case, but if it's cheaper to make a cyanocobalamin as opposed to methylcobalamin, maybe that's why they make it. I haven't looked into the economics of it, but there you can easily see, is it methylcobalamin in the back of your B vitamin or not?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different things. I think nowadays we're learning so much more about personalized medicine. So I'm a big proponent of, you have to be an advocate for your own health. And if something isn't feeling right, or you feel low energy, or you're not sleeping well, there's probably something that you're eating, or maybe that you could do. I'm not a doctor, clearly. But I think it's always great to go and find a health professional who can really take a look at each person's individual circumstances and actually treat the whole person, not just a symptom.
Yeah. No, Marcia, I love this conversation because, we are talking about preventing scary diseases as much as possible. But the reality is, with founders and entrepreneurs, they are burning the midnight oil, and they're probably, I could speak for myself, at time periods and not paid attention to my health, which is, lowers performance, right? If we thought of ourselves as high performing athletes, which, entrepreneurs are, maybe we'd make different choices. So I love to hear, go a little deeper on the type of supplements that you do take. So, we talked about water first. Everyone's heard, oh yeah, I should be drinking more water. Was there something research wise that you heard that kind of scared you enough to be like, I need to, install this whole filtration system. I need to make sure I'm drinking X amount of ounces of water a day. What did you read and see that, caused you to it was a deal breaker? You needed it in the house.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't one particular thing. It was more that I just knew that the more I was consistent with drinking water or being around water that was clean and well filtered, the better I felt. And I just kind of got that in my brain early on and decided that this was going to be a priority for me.
Because I have heard there is research, and I don't know, probably someone could look it up, that if you have Parkinson's, like water, the physicians advise like drinking X amount of water a day that helps. And I don't know the research behind it, but I'm sure it's out there. So from a supplement perspective, what do you like to take?
So I'm all about the B vitamins. The D vitamins actually help you to sleep. A lot of people, if they do get their blood taken, sometimes the ratios that you see of what's normal on blood sometimes can actually be too low or too high. So it's great to talk to a functional medicine doctor or somebody who's really knowledgeable with these things, because what I realized is that by me having a vitamin D level that was a little bit too low, even though it was still showing in that normal range for me personally, by me taking a little bit of a supplement a couple times a week, all of a sudden my sleep starts to, be a little better, because as we get older, our sleep gets a little more compromised sometimes. When I was younger, I was a rock star sleeper, but now, I've got to work on it a little bit harder. But probiotics, I'm a huge fan of this one particular probiotic that actually the woman who created it, her husband has Parkinson's disease. And that's how I met her, because at the time my mom was sick and we bonded over that. And she went on to create this amazing probiotic. Her company's called BiotiQuest. and Sugar Shift is the probiotic, and I'm a huge fan of it. There are a lot of things that she cannot claim about it because it's you can't do that in the supplement world.
You could say
but
supports.
I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
Supports, but you cannot claim it helps anything.
You can't claim it, but you can support it.
It's BiotiQuest, you said?
BiotiQuest, yeah.
And then what were you saying about Sugar Shift?
That's the name of the actual, there's a couple different versions of the probiotic that she has. She has one for immunity, one for sugar. The sugar one is the main one. And the reason why she called it Sugar Shift is really because she was trying to get a couple of, I might not tell the story right, so sorry, Martha. She was trying to get a bunch of Parkinson's patients to take it and see, what the results were. In the process, she had a lot of, non-Parkinson's people taking it as well. Well, some people had diabetes, and it ended up helping their diabetes, and they really weren't at first equating that it was because of the probiotic, but it turned out that was helping also.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I drink kombucha every single day for the probiotics. And I'm lactose intolerant, so I can't, eat yogurt or anything. But
right.
Yeah, it's helped. So B vitamins, D, probiotics, anything else?
Well, without getting into like a ton of detail, let's see. I would just say those are the main ones. Quercetin, I also take. That's kind of a good overall. And then Theracumin, which is mainly for like inflammation and helps with joints and things like that.
Yeah, you should be like the Angel Capital Association vitamin list.
List, yes, we could do that.
If you want to be energized, run your company properly, you got to follow the Marcia vitamin list.
There you go.
And when we talk about Mindshift Capital, it really, focuses on the women, people of color. And, we are talking about investing in change, right? And you can make a difference, whatever you spend your money on. And so I know one of your friends wrote a book, Activate Your Money.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to what does that mean?
So on the Next Wave Investment Committee, one of my friends, Janine Firpo, wrote an amazing book called Activate Your Money. And actually, she now has a group that called Invest for Better, which allows anybody, women mainly, do it, but of course, men are welcome to, where it's a course that you can go through and you can learn. You take like 1 hour a week or a month or however it's set up, and you can learn about these different things. So take, for example, where you shop. Where you shop actually matters. And you could do something like buy at just a regular store like you always would. Or, for example, I just spoke to somebody recently who said they really wanted a new pair of sneakers, but they wanted to make sure that the sneakers were made at a place where the labor was fair to all. And so they went and found a very specific sneaker company to buy from. Where you bank matters. And Janine goes on in the book to talk about self-help credit union, which is a place where if you do your banking there, checking, savings, you're putting deposits into the bank, they can then loan to certain people that maybe couldn't qualify at a normal bank. So where you bank matters. Where you put your money in your retirement, should it be in a mutual fund or even in a stock? There are all kinds of tools that you can use in order to see if you really like to use one particular, if you'd really like to have your money invested in one particular area or not, based on your values. So if you say, well, you know what, I really don't want to invest in a company that has anything to do with fossil fuel or guns or alcohol. Well, then what you can do is you can go through and screen out the companies that are involved in those things and make sure that your money is invested in something different. And there's a website called As You Sow, SOW, that allows you to look up all kinds of fascinating website.
That's really cool. Hours.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it. Really AsYouSow.com.
As You Sow.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. And then Activate Your Money, that book is out already?
Yes, it's already out. You can get it on Amazon or any of the places that you get books.
So Marcia, the angelcapitalassociation.org, people should check it out also. And the Desert Angels is a really cool story.
Yeah. So the Desert Angels, they're a member group of the Angel Capital Association. Basically, we are the professional society. So all of the different angel groups and individual angels can join, and we're like a big network to provide education, public policy, all kinds of things. And
So if
so
an individual angel or you have a group, let's say you have an angel group in Chicago, you can join as a group and members can join individually and get connection, education, and other resources.
That's exactly right. And we also do public policy work to make sure that legislators know that sometimes the big guys like private equity and whatever, they get a lot of attention. So sometimes the laws are being made. We have to be like, wait a minute, us little angels here, we've got different needs, and we help the entrepreneurs when they're really, really early. And so please don't do anything to mess that up. So we do a lot of work with public policy. But the Desert Angels are in Tucson, Arizona, and they did a study and they looked at over a 10-year period, all of the investments that they made. And they found that for every $100,000, and over this period of time, I think it was around $35 million that they invested over the 10-year period. But for every $100,000, they created 5.4 direct jobs, and which equaled about $400,000 and $450,000 in wages. But the biggest thing that meant to me is what they said about economic output. It actually created $2.1 million of economic output for every $100,000. So think about that. If you had, all of this money, the 35 million that they had invested, and every $100,000 is creating over $2 million of economic output for their area. And in most cases, the Desert Angels, the group at any given time was probably no more than 40 or 50 people. So think about this, in a lot of cases we think, oh, well, I'm only one person. How am I going to make that big of a difference? And I'm totally guilty of thinking that sometimes too. But then you look at something like this and you're thinking, wow, here's this group of people that's really a pretty small group of people to be making such a significant impact in their local community.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And you have, there's a conference every year?
There's a conference every year, and there's one coming up. Everybody should come. It's May 17th through the 19th, and it'll be in Atlantic City.
Is it always in May?
It's usually in either end of April or sometime in May.
So who are some of the speakers, either current or past, that have been interesting?
So in the past, we've had Carla Harris, who is just an amazing speaker from Morgan Stanley. And this year we have Kelly Latimer, who is an astronaut. She'll be speaking.
That's fantastic. What I want to talk about a little bit is, when we talk about the book that you referred to, are there certain companies that you have found that you like to frequent, or when you've looked at As We Sow?
Oh, okay. So, right. So if I'm looking at As You Sow, I kind of go through and look at things that are more in the public space. So, there's, all kinds of different things that you can look for and different ways that you can kind of sort and make that happen. I would say that for the most part, though, what I'm really looking for are things in the private markets. And if you look through my portfolio and how, I know in my bio, it says I have over 200 companies, that I have investments in a lot of cases, that's through funds. And I am a huge fan of funds for a lot of reasons, mainly because, this is a game that I hope at some point everybody will get in on, because it really is the way that we can make change. But in a lot of cases, it's really hard to have a diversified portfolio and minimize the risk if you can't make a lot of investments. And making a lot of investments means you have to have a lot of money. Okay, so there's no way I could have made 200 investments into companies. There's just no humanly possible way. So how did I do that? I went and found funds that were being managed either, in some cases I helped to manage them, But in other cases, I was just a passive person, but was able to find the ones that I thought their thesis was interesting. Like Mindshift is a good example because we invest in women-led companies. And then by putting in a little bit of money, you can get exposure to in some cases, 10, 15, even 25 companies. And so that's how you really de-risk and kind of build up your portfolio.
Marcia, I just want to be the first one to thank you. This has been fantastic. And I love that you shared not just the business, but also the health side of things as well.
Sure.
I want to point people online to check out the website. If there's any other places we should point people to, but definitely marciadawood.com, as I mentioned and spelled it earlier. We'll link it up in the show notes, mindshiftcapital.com, and also angelcapitalassociation.org. Are there any other places online we should send people to?
Well, we can also link BiotiQuest's website if people are interested in the probiotic. And if they are interested in Kiwi for Gmail, they can look there.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcia. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.